What's the crack, everyone? It is Nathan here, aka the Rambling Kern, and head instructor of Kern School of Combat. So, this, as you can imagine, was a bit of a difficult video to research, but a very fascinating topic nonetheless. So, this video is about secret societies and their involvement in faction fighting. Now, secret societies in Ireland are obviously something that aren't very well known about. They are somewhat discussed, and you do see references to them, especially with regards to the famine in certain history books. However, they have a very long-standing history in Ireland, and the ones that I'm going to focus on are not your, ones that you might be a bit more familiar with, like the stonemasons or things like that. However, masons do play a role in some of these secret societies. A lot of the secret societies I'm going to touch on are agrarian-based secret societies. So that means ones formed by farmers or in and around agrarian-based activities, be it farm labourers, farm hands, farmers themselves, or various different types of manual labourers. Now, there is various different points throughout Irish history where these groups rise in popularity and kind of subside, yet stay a constant throughout Irish history for a very long period of time. Now really it's in the 1700s where we see the biggest, let's say, notoriety start to appear of them. And that's with what we see referred to as the White Boy movement. Now the White Boy movement was basically various different secret agrarian societies doing what they could to combat issues of the day. So often these would be things like tithes, which I've referenced in my previous video. There was a similar thing going on in the Roman Catholic Church, basically excessive fees being imposed upon people that people were going against as well, unfair wage practices, unfair rents, various different grievances that people had, and these societies were ways of dealing with them because there wasn't a legal framework for people to deal with these. And this kind of comes back to what I was discussing in some of my previous videos of how factions played a very big role as an unofficial police force. And we really start to see this as time progresses and landlords gain more power within Irish society. So often what would happen was a society would form and would go against whatever the specific cause that they had to fight against was. But as time progressed, laws were brought in, such as the White Boy Acts, to combat these, and these led to some very violent interactions with the authorities and these various different groups, leading to many of these groups being killed and sent off to various different colonies and obviously to prison. But as time progressed, what started to happen was that these societies were both somewhat more, let's say, open about their dealings, and some of the factions started to morph into secret societies. So the White Foot movement, not to be confused with the White Boys, is one such example of that. So the White Feet were a faction who were very well known in Ireland and who had various fights with the Blackfeet. Now, from what I can see from my research, White Feet comes from the basically they were a Mason group. Like I said, a lot of these factions were based in around particular workforces, and that's where they got their names and notoriety. And that's basically what happened with the Whitefeet. So these were Masons who worked with lime and hence had feet that were covered in white lime all the time, hence the term Whitefeet. Or at least that's what I can glean from my research. Obviously this is a bit difficult because a lot of these organizations were secret societies, so to find specific information on them is quite difficult, which is why this video is going to be a little bit more of an overview rather than a specific look at different cases. However, what happens, such as what I mentioned in the previous video with Daniel O'Connell, was that the Catholic Reformation groups who were looking to basically for Catholic independence to have a better position in society for your average Irish Catholic, were basically taking these factions and trying to stop them being violent, and that was a big part of the movement. And what happened then was these groups slowly morphed into secret societies, still with obviously the same members, but their focus shifted from rather being factions for fighting each other two factions who are fighting the injustices that they viewed of the day. And when we get to the 1800s, that slowly becomes more and more dealing with the authorities, with tithes, like I mentioned, and with landlords. And there's various different ways that this happened. So you have a classic example of threatening letters. I'll show one on screen so you can have a look at what those were like. You have making people take oaths. This is a very common one. And I know that to us today might not seem very serious, but at the time it was viewed very seriously. And these could be both religious in some way, or they could just be purely about whatever the grievance was, be it monetary or otherwise. And one of the things that you start to see is the basic weapon seizures. So if one of these secret societies knew that someone had a firearm, for example, they would go to their home and try to take that firearm. And there's a few very famous instances of fights breaking out and basically people being shot and killed on both sides. And this happens quite commonly, and you do see various different instances of this throughout the period. And interestingly, as we even get into the 20th century, a lot of these secret agrarian societies were then co-opted into the Irish Republican Brotherhood. And basically they'd already had these ways of communicating with each other and doing things covertly throughout the Irish countryside, and were the kind of ideal base for launching the what was to be the following wars of independence within Ireland, and obviously the Civil War following on from those as well. So really fascinating to how these secret societies were kind of intertwined with factions and faction fighting throughout the period. And obviously as time went, these factions were being kind of transformed and either being asked to shut down completely, or in some cases being turned into secret societies. Now the interesting thing about the secret societies is that, like I mentioned, some of these were deported essentially to the New World, and some obviously chose to leave on their own volition. And you do see the continuation of many of these in the New World. And if someone pointed out in my comments, the Order of Hibernian, the Ancient Order of Hibernians, if I'm butchering that, please forgive me, does actually come from one of these movements, which I find fascinating. But if you want to even look at a very famous example of the Black Donnelly case in Canada, where one of these disputes basically continued on in Canada with a secret society and a specific family, which led to violence and bloodshed. Very, very fascinating case, but also one that I think really harkens back to many of the things that we see within Irish stick fighting. For example, a lot of the Irish stick fighting material, techniques and lineages, especially for example the Doyle style, come from these groups and individuals and sections of Irish society who were very private and in many cases secretive of who they were and what they did. And obviously those techniques were kind of kept private and secret, because not just did you have potential threats from the authorities, but you had potential threats from other secret societies. And like I said, there was a very various sectarian elements to this as well. I mean, the classic example would be the ribbon men and the Orange Order, or what would then later become the Orange Order, as they are known today. And there's various different sectarian elements and sectarian violence that went on. But like I said, this carried on to the New World, so you can really understand how these secret organizations kept information from the old world and things that were important to them, and kept passing down those traditions. And you can still see those societies in full swing today. So a very fascinating bit of history, one that obviously is quite difficult for someone like myself to research, but plays an important role in faction fighting. I think it's important to discuss in this ongoing series I'm doing about the causes and situations around the faction fights. So once again, thank you very much for watching. If you do enjoy what I do have a Patreon. You can donate as much as €1 upwards. If you'd like to buy me a coffee or a pint for the work I've been doing, that's your way to say thank you and to help out, and I'd really appreciate it. I do have a lot of tests and various different things coming down the way, which I'm doing at my own expense, so anything you can spare is a huge help. And if not, Just like, comment and subscribe. All of those things do really help. I've surpassed my goals so far for this year, and I really do appreciate everyone's support and help. Once again, thank you very much. Slán.